Good evening, everybody. We can bring ourselves to quiet and I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings? I ask just so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening, and I look to Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I reserve my right to.
Thank you. Thank you. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated. Members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give you further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. That moves us on to our agenda, and item number 1, I have apologies from Councillor Cannon and Councillor Parfitt. Are there any other apologies? Can't see anyone. So item number 2, similar to item 1, I've got Councillor Springett for Councillor Parfitt, and I've got Councillor Spooner for Councillor Cannon. No other substitutes. We don't have any urgent items this evening, and notification of visiting members. I can see Councillor Cleater in the gallery, so if you'd like to approach and let us know what items you'd want to speak on, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Items 12 and 13 on the crime and disorder agenda, please.
Thank you. Yes, just for those watching and those in the room know, we are acting as the Crime and Disorder Committee meeting first of all this evening. So we'll be running through that agenda, finishing that meeting, and then we'll be going on to our overview and scrutiny as usual. I haven't been advised of any disclosures by members and officers, but are there any that anyone would like to raise? Can't see any. Any disclosures of lobbying? Again, I can't see anyone. I propose to take all items in public on this agenda. Is that agreed? We've had the minutes for this committee and they go right back to the 12th of June 2024, if anyone can remember that far back, but hopefully you've had a look through your agenda. And can I ask, are those minutes of the meeting rather, held on the 12th of June 2024 approved as the correct record and I can sign them? Is that agreed? Lovely, I shall do that later. Item 9, we don't have any petitions this evening. And item 10, we don't have any questions from local residents. Item 11, we've not received any questions from members. So that brings us on to item 12, which is our item on the nuisance vehicles from the Crime Reduction Partnership. And this report is going to be introduced by Martin Jeans, who is our Community and Strategic Partnerships Managers. We've also got the following external officers in attendance for both items 12 and 13. So thank you very much for coming this evening. We've got Chief Inspector Stuart Paul. We've got Inspector Steve Kent. We've got PC Nicholas Benson, who's particularly a specialist with the nuisance vehicles. And if I can pass over to Martin Jeans to introduce the report. Thank you.
Good evening, members. In August, we brought to you a report via the Cabinet to give an update in relation to the work that we are undertaking to deal with nuisance vehicles within the borough. We set out in that report, as is detailed in the report that you've been provided this evening, our proposal to continue to use the existing powers within the community protection notices that came in under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014. And at that time, we didn't feel it was necessary or proportionate to introduce a public space protection order. This report was brought to you this evening because it was felt by Cabinet that a 6-monthly update should be provided to you as the overview and scrutiny for crime and disorder. And I'm glad to be joined this evening by my police colleagues, particularly Nick, who's joined us on a rest day, in order to give an update as the lead. I've provided an update within the report itself, but I think it's important to hear from the officer in relation to some of the work he's specifically been doing to prepare us for the spring and summer, as the periods that have followed since that last report have not been the busiest for nuisance bikes.
I'll start again.
Okay, hello. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, my name's PC Nick Benson, so I'm an officer within the Neighbourhood Task Force at Maidstone. I've worked within neighbourhood policing for about 4.5 years now, and in that time I've dealt with nuisance vehicles for quite a lot of that time. But more recently I've been made the lead in terms of tackling the issue, certainly as we lead into spring and summer. As part of the work that I've been doing, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a summary of the last kind of 3 or 4 months or so, and some of the work that I've been doing, both internally at Kent Police and within partnership with the council as well. One of the things that I've done is I've gone to all of our local policing teams and within my own department as well, to look at providing education around dealing with nuisance vehicles, delivering policy and legislation refreshers to officers, both old and new, and just trying to look at giving them confidence in dealing with the issue, and also to kind of promote working internally within Kent Police, because it's quite common for within a big organisation for things to perhaps not get spoken about between different departments. So there's been better working between the local policing teams and the neighbourhood policing team in relation to this issue. Trying to encourage them to information share with me particularly, so that I can follow up on things. So for example, if a response officer goes and deals with an off-road bike and they get it stopped and they deal with the issues that are there at the roadside, they would then feed into me a bit more information about that stop, and then I would follow up with community protection warnings or ABAs or whatever might be relevant for that particular situation. And that's worked really well so far. I've also worked very closely with our beat officers, distributing kind of Kent Police comms material, including leaflets and posters that they can put up in their areas, to encourage members of the public to report the issues to us. Sometimes people don't do it, they don't have confidence in doing that. So it's trying to build confidence within the community to report these issues, and importantly tell us exactly what it is we need to know to actually deal with them as well. And then also posters that highlight the fact that there are increased patrols in certain areas, both marked and unmarked, to try and tackle the issue. So the idea of that is that any would-be nuisance vehicle riders would be hopefully put off from doing so, although we all know that that likely isn't always as effective as we want it to be. But the idea is that they're aware that we are there and we are there to deal with the issue. Also liaised with our child-centred policing team, who have developed an input package which is going to be delivered to secondary schools over the next kind of 3 months plus, which will be educating younger people on the legislation, legalities of using vehicles both on and off the road. We often come across younger people who claim ignorance, at least, or certainly perhaps don't understand what they are allowed to do. So part of the education of the younger people will hopefully help them realise that just because their parents have bought them a bike, it doesn't mean they can go and ride it through Parkwood Fields, for example. In terms of enforcement, I've already mentioned the community protection warnings, community protection notices, and the acceptable behaviour agreements. So I've developed a kind of a pro forma template, which has been given out to our beat officers, and also that I've used to give warnings and then notices to offenders that are stopped in a court. That has been probably one of our most effective tools. CPWs generally are a fantastic tool for us in terms of preventing nuisance behaviour, and particularly when it's a younger person and there are parents involved as well. When we've involved housing associations and tenancy warning letters have been given out, as soon as you introduce a risk of people losing their tenancy, parents then tend to become a more suitable guardian and tend to take better control of their children. We've done many days of action over the years, but more recently we've really had a drive on specific days or afternoons of action in the areas where we've identified there are the primary problems. So every time I come into work after a set of rest days, I look at our reports on nuisance vehicles across the district, and I do a monthly analysis of where the issues are and understanding what those issues are, because it's not always as simple as an off-road bike. It could be car meetings, for example, where there's 30, 40 cars meeting up and racing up and down the road. So it can vary, but yeah, I do that on a monthly basis, and that then informs what I plan with the beat officers for the coming weeks and months. So more recently, so on the 7th of March, following a large increase in car meetings up at the A20 near the McHugh Hotel, where we were getting multiple reports of vehicles driving dangerously, racing up and down the A20. We've had, as I said, on the 7th of March, we had an operation up there, working in partnership with the council, and based on our presence, we had about 30 or 40 cars turning up, and we were able to disperse them before any issues occurred. We engaged with the people and educated them on the fact that they can't be meeting there and racing up and down the streets. And we've collected upwards of 40 registration plates, and we're in the process of working with our internal legal team to come up with a letter that can accompany the CPWs, which we will post out to the registered owners of each of those vehicles. On the 21st of March, Friday, we ran an Optoplete, which is our response to nuisance vehicles in the Shepway and Parkwood wards in Maidstone. That was really successful. The usual crowd appeared with their bikes on the green. They were diverted off the green, and then subsequently one of them was stopped. I have since interviewed him. He's made a full admission to all the offences, and I only 2 days ago, submitted a case file for that individual to be prosecuted for those offences. I've also issued him a CPW, and his mum has assured me that he won't be getting another bike, so that's positive. And then following that, on the 22nd of March, the day after, we went to Pilgrim's Way up in Hollingbourne. It's another problem area where typically it's older off-road riders that take quad bikes and motorbikes up there and ride along the Pilgrim's Way. An officer was out there on Sunday and managed to get quite a few good photographs of offending vehicles using the camera that we've been able to get funding for. So we put a bid in and got funding for a proper DSLR camera with a telephoto lens up to 300mm focal length, which I'm in the process of showing people how to use in the office, and I take out with me pretty much on a daily basis, just in case calls come in. But certainly when we do days of action, it's a fantastic tool for us to have, because most of the time the issue we have is actually identifying who the offenders are. They're either they typically make off, they don't stop for us, and obviously we have to consider the safety aspect in terms of pursuing them. So typically we can't pursue them. But yeah, being able to discreetly take photographs and capture evidence from a distance of a high quality will prove massively useful for us, particularly when it comes to actually prosecuting and identifying these people. And then pretty much in terms of the evidence we capture, when we've got our body worn cameras or our mobile phones, whilst they're good for capturing evidence within a short kind of radius of ourselves, the camera that we're using will be able to get much better photos and put us in a position where we're not potentially scaring people off into making off from us and putting themselves or other people at risk of harm. So I'm pleased to say that we've dished out upwards of 12 CPWs and ABAs over the last few months. Several vehicle seizures ranging from mini quads to big off-road motorbikes and electric motorbikes, and we've had several Section 59 warnings given out as well, which is another valuable tool that we have. And some of the examples we've had, we had an adult identified as driving antisocially and failing to stop for police out in Wateringbury. Charges for offences ranging from dangerous driving to failing to stop for police are currently being sought from the CPS for that, so that's positive. Again, the CPW went along with that as well. We had a juvenile stopped on an off-road motorbike, a vehicle seized, and charges pending for several offences, on top of the example I've already given as well. So, so far so good. We know that it will become a more prevalent issue as we go into, or later into spring and into summer, which is why we're trying to start early, get the ball rolling. We've got a good response package in place now, and I'm confident that whilst the issue will never go away fully, we can hopefully, with these increased efforts and with somebody leading it, we can hopefully reduce the issue and provide some confidence to residents that we are actually trying to do something about it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I go to the committee, I've got visiting member, Councillor Cleater, if you'd like to come forward. We're going to get you a new microphone, so just 2 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to congratulate so far on the work that's been done. We work very closely with our community officers in Shepway and Parkwood, but we're well aware of the problems there are with nuisance bikes there, and it is coming up to the season for it again. I'm very pleased that we're holding parents to account and working with the local housing associations. However, not all of them live in Golden Homes properties, and we do seem to struggle more to engage with the other housing authorities in terms of getting some joint working on this. The other point I wanted to make is we've also seen a plethora now of thefts of scooters, motorcycles that seem to end up being dumped in Moat Park, usually after they've been set on fire or damaged. And I know for some of the people who own those bikes, it's their only way to get to work and back. So I think there's a whole raft of things that are going on with nuisance bikes. The other question, and this was something that was on Facebook and we need to be mindful of, was we're talking a lot about bikes and motor vehicles, but actually we need to watch what's going on in town as well. I know I'm not the councillor for around here, but actually I live close by and I have to walk in. And we had the horses and buggies going at some speed down Week Street, and that's absolutely fine. It's part of the culture in that. But if you're going to do that on the public road, you need to do that safely. So that would be quite interesting to see what we can do to work with the community to make them understand that was actually quite a dangerous thing to do. And there were lots of posts about that, about people struggling to get out the way because they were trotting quite fast. In terms of the community protection notices and that they are one bit of the ammunition. The other bit is actually drones, and looking at the paperwork, we've got 2 comments that basically say the police haven't got the money and the training, and we haven't got the money and the training, because it would mean taking resources from waste crime, which actually is another bane of everyone's life around here. But I really think we need to be going back and having a look at that, because I think drone would be the best way and safer way to get images, especially for persistent offenders, and to work with various ways of trying to fund that, because I think that's safer for the officers, safer for the kids, and safer for the people trying to get evidence. And I think it's quite sad, really, that both organisations are struggling to say, we've seen how effective they are, shall we say, in the wider European field on drones. Not that we want to do that sort of targeting, by the way, in Maidstone. I'll make that point right now. But I think they are an effective and safer use to gather evidence, but also safely seeing where these people are coming from and going to. And we haven't heard or seen much of our mutual friend on Shepway at the moment on his quad bike. So that all seems to be quiet on that front. But if we could, I think as a committee, look at making some recommendations around drones and how we fund that and how we get funding for that, that would be, I think, really welcome for the people, not just of Shepway, Parkwood, Mangravis, but it's also tipping over into Bourton-on-Chelsea as well as they cut through Mangravis, and it makes it really difficult for residents, especially our older residents, because certainly in Mangravis they cut through onto Mangravis Field, or on some occasions get dropped off by their parents, which we've witnessed ourselves, Councillor Wilkinson and I. That's the contribution I wanted to make on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. Probably with the point about the town instance, I wonder if you might take that out and reply to Councillor Cleater separately on that, Martin. If you could gather the info and report back, that would be great. And then because I think it's unfair to spring something that's not related to the report on you tonight, but if we could if anyone could come back on the thefts about the scooters and the motor vehicles that end up in Moat Park, and probably the bigger item that obviously Councillor Cleater ended with, the thoughts about the drones and where we would go, if that would be the next stage or if that'd been looked at or something. If I could ask Martin to come back on those, thank you.
Thank you. Obviously, the drone is an operational consideration. At this time, we've looked at what we have in our plans to going forward. I'm more than willing, when we next come back, because we will come back with this item, to give an update in relation to how we've got on and whether or not a drone would have been beneficial. We have, as indicated in the report, access to the drone technology that our waste crime team has. Whilst it does, in a sense, take it away from our waste crime team in relation to their use to deploy it for waste crime purposes, it's still used on an operational basis. And what we're demonstrating here is, whilst there is a responsive element, the more effective way of dealing with this type of problem is planned operations. So if you've got a planned operation, we can book the waste crime team's time in order to support that operation and use the drone. As an example, although it doesn't relate to nuisance vehicles, we use drone technology in the town centre to look at the buildings that were being accessed by young people, to identify weak spots within the town centre and work with landowners to safeguard the rooftops so that our young people weren't on them. So it's not that we're adverse to drone technology, it's just it needs to be justifiable with the resources that's required and the additional training. I wouldn't want us to outlay on something that's quite expensive for it to just sit in an office and not be deployed.
Thank you. So first of all, from the committee, I've got Councillor Hickson, followed by Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Hickson.
Good evening. Just to follow up actually quickly on what Councillor Cleater was talking about, I actually witnessed the buggies going through the town centre, and they went through the pedestrian area as well at some speed, and that was early evening when I was waiting for one of these committees. I've also been behind them on major A roads where they've been 2 and 3 abreast on major A roads, so it is a significant problem that does need to be looked into. Okay, thank you. And secondly, in terms of there's data here around sort of Shepway and places like that, but do you have any data for Tobble? I'm one of the trustees of the Hill Park Nature Reserve, and we do get quite regular reports of quad bikes up on the reserve.
I do have wall-based data. I can share it with you. 75% or more of the reporting came from the Parkwood Shepway area. From memory, the Tobble area didn't come out as being particularly high, but I will look at it and come back to you with some figures if that's okay. In relation to the other issue that's been raised, just to address it, obviously it was reported to the police. It is being investigated. I'm sure they would answer for themselves, but this is our committee, so I'll answer on behalf of the partnership. But it is something that's being looked at as an offence, as with any other nuisance vehicle. So it's being processed, I think, is the best way of putting it.
Thank you. Next, I've got Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank you for your hard work on Operation Deplete, and hopefully that will mitigate for next summer or for this summer any problems that may arise. I just wanted to ask, last summer, the figures almost doubled in June last year, and I was just wondering what may have caused that figure, if you had any understanding of why there was that massive increase, and if you have an understanding how that can help mitigate it further in the summertime.
Let me just find the right page in the report, bear with me. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so there's no real science as to what suddenly caused that increase. Our working theory is that the red period on that graph that's in Appendix 3 shows the period that officers were actively deployed to do opt-delete, and that included increased engagement with the local residents, posters, signposts, etc. So the theory that Steve Kent and I have discussed is around that in that period we saw an increase, not only because there were more bikes, but because we were asking people to record. I have another graph, which I didn't provide, but it basically shows that we have a similar increase in June for both the noise from bikes plus off-road bikes, which is one of the theories we had around the conclusion that people will report it either as off-road or noisy, depending on whether they see the vehicle or not. But we've alluded to the fact that we think they are the same incident being reported by different people. And what we hope was that increased reporting. We saw similar. The police ran an operation in Fant called Operation Possum, all right, and there was a similar graph that we produced for that showed a period of increased reporting whilst the officers were deployed, and then the tail off after the officers withdrew. So we're hoping that that's a kind of a combination of increased reporting, and not only the fact that when the officers are in that area, they're adding to the reports because they're loading their own ones on. So hopefully it's a reflection of more intense work in that area and possibly a bit of better weather.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Harper next.
Thank you. Yeah, I found this very interesting, very informative to see the work we're managing to get done. But I would think the issue around drones, which Councillor Cleater drew attention to, is one perhaps we should give consideration to, because clearly neither the police or ourselves have that level of capacity for doing regular work on this, and it's not much point having to share a drone with waste crime when you have to pre-book it, because the nature of crime isn't that it's pre-booked. You know, if people told us we're going to go and organise a riot in Moat Park next week, we could get the drone booked, couldn't we? But they're not likely to do that. You have to be ready to respond when you start getting queries coming through and have a fairly quick response rate. So I think there's a lot of sense in actually following up the idea of the council purchasing a drone, which it could share with the police, so that both the police and the council would have access to a drone which could be used for this type of work, and providing fairly quick response in terms of monitoring. Because, I mean, obviously, we've heard the main issues in the past being around Parkwood and Shepway. We also, in fact, are getting low-level problems from one particular household, which actually I could tell you, everybody there knows which family it is. Well, they're using off-road bikes and all the rest of it up and down, causing a massive nuisance in the area. And if we had access to a drone facility, because it's happening almost every day, you could start to pinpoint it, because otherwise the trouble is you only go on residents' hearsay that it's somebody at a certain house. It's not the evidence clearly you need. So I'd like to perhaps propose an amendment to the motion, the proposal to just to note the report that we request the council to look into purchasing a drone, a CPT drone, which can be shared with the police. And that's, I mean, to support that, I mean, we do have a contingency budget. We agreed the budget at our February council meeting, and within the council's budget, it has a considerable contingency of at least £500,000 plus, which is there to address issues which come up during the year, which weren't budgeted for at the time the budget was laid out. Now, this is that type of issue, I would think. It's been only raised to us tonight. Clearly, an issue around relating to law and order and antisocial behaviour, and one which I would have thought that, for instance, may be a pot of money available. And I'm sure, given our capital programme of tens and tens of millions of pounds or more, that we can find £6,500 to address this issue, which, as I say, would enable us and the police to work jointly on a major issue which affects residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. So our report was for noting, so we don't have it. So I'm going to take it that you're proposing a recommendation that we, because it says on page 20, it's 4 officers and a drone for approximately £6,500. So your recommendation seems to be that you would propose that we use some money for the budget, or look to investigate money from the budget to put towards that use. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Springett, did you want to speak now or later?
No, I think it's an excellent idea. I think most law-abiding residents would really support that, and it would enable the police to safely pursue people without doing it in a vehicle that could cause other incidents. So thank you.
Okay, so that's a recommendation to Cabinet. Now, I had a couple of people that wanted to speak on the recommendation. Councillor, I had Councillor Keeley, but I'm presuming yours was more the actual report, was it? Or did you want to speak to the recommendation?
It was literally what Councillor Harper said, that at £6,500, there is no reason why we can't do that. And I did have one other question, but if you want to move on and come back, that's cool.
Yeah, I'll come back because we've got the recommendation. But Councillor Cook, you wanted to speak on the recommendation.
Yes, did. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this is one of those things that on the face of it sounds like a really good idea. But I think we actually need to be a little bit careful, and we need to ask a lot of questions. One, there needs to be an agreement with the police on this matter. So I think rather than recommend, I mean, I'm not against the idea, but I'm concerned when a local authority gets into the business of sending drones up and photographing people in public. It's a little bit like private photographs being sent to the police for use as opposed to the police cameras themselves. In law, I think they are very differently weighted. I'd rather be. I think if there's ways that we can do this and legitimately work with the police on this, it may be that we just basically sort of buy the drone and ask the police to operate it if they've got the resources and ability to do so. But I think this needs to come back to the committee before a decision is taken, and have a proper report on the way that this would operate, because I'm a little bit concerned about things like data protection and people's rights when they get photographed by. I mean, I'm very mindful of people with Ring doorbells, and the people over the other side of the road get very uppity if they're being recorded going in and out of their house. So the idea that we're sending up drones to potentially capture people's images is something that should concern us. But I do think the way to go forward with this is to properly investigate it, and before a final recommendation is made on this, that it should come back to the committee. If Paul would accept that within his recommendation, I'd be happy to support it on that basis. But at the moment, I think it's I want to see those safeguards.
If it was to come
Second, through the chair, we don't have to do that job as scrutiny, because we can allow the Cabinet to have a look at that, while they're making their decision. They don't just go make it really quickly. I was very conscious that Inspector Steve Kent just wanted to speak on something. So I wonder if we just do that before we go further on the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to offer some reassurances around the deployment of drones. It's not something we do willy-nilly. We have to do risk assessments, and I have to put the various proportionalities, necessities within that, which include human rights. So in regards to the example that Mr. Cook gave, we can't just put it up. It has to be authorised by me, and it has to be what I would class as specific. So it'd be an area for this particular reason, and if we fell with that outside of that, then it would be deemed as breaching human rights. So it is very clear cut.
Thank you. I think that added a lot of clarity. Thank you for coming in there. So I've got Councillor Field to speak on the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not per se opposed to the use of drones in for enforcement of antisocial behaviour and criminal activity, but I think it's important that we as a committee don't get fixated on this £6,500 figure. As Inspector Kent's very kindly explained, there's a process, and behind that I'm sure a fair amount of paperwork and various checks and balances. So what looks like a £6,500 capital purchase in reality is likely to be the training of several officers at Kent Police and members of Mr. Jean's team, a whole process for how and when it is deployed on an intelligence-led basis, and so on and so forth. And I'm just a little concerned with the recommendation, although absolutely understand that it comes from a genuine position that it's at risk of oversimplifying what is in reality quite potentially quite a complex operational decision. For me personally, we have had Mr. Jeans speak on where we are with drones in terms of the consideration of the operational viability versus cost. I think there are opportunities for this committee when it sits as overview and scrutiny to look at things like the budget process. I doubt very much there's time to get this meaningfully done ahead of this summer period where we have peak activity. So with respect to Councillor Harper, I will vote against the recommendation, but I think there are other opportunities that we have when we sit as overview and scrutiny to look at this sort of thing in terms of the budgetary round and working with the relevant cabinet member and taking further advice from Mr. Jeans and his department to consider the small capital versus the potential operational costs, departmental impact that has. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got two more people to speak on the motion, and that is Councillor Mackay and then Councillor Hickson. So Councillor Mackay first.
Our role as a committee is not to micromanage how the police conduct their operations. I'm glad that Inspector Kent spoke on this. They have their own drones, they have their own procedures. I would not deem to be proficient in advising them how they go about doing their job and what equipment they use, what tools they use. So to try and make a decision, even prior to asking the police what they want, is presumptuous and out of order, I would say. It's, by all means, we can suggest they look at these, but I'm sure they're already aware of what tools they have. I've got nothing against drones, and I would strongly suspect that the police have their own, and they have been trained on their own pieces of equipment. What are we going to do? Go to Amazon and buy one? You know, get off. Buying the equipment is the tip of an iceberg. Training is using them. So I think this whole thing, we just wasted 15 minutes, in my opinion, discussing a subject that we should not have touched upon. The operation of the police is for the police.
I think I'll probably come back there and say that we actually were talking about giving, it would be the community protection team that would hold that drone, so it would be within Maidstone. So I think it is actually quite right that we do discuss it and have a think about it. Right, so I've got Councillor Hickson next. Thank you.
Thank you. So my day job is I'm a media teacher. And a few years ago, one of my former colleagues decided it'd be a great idea to buy some drones so that we could do some filming. Problem is that in a lot of places you can't use them for national security, for safeguarding. There's so many reasons why you can't use them. And so their use has to be really, really specific. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Field has said. They don't work on their own. They're not automatic. They need, so you're not talking about £6,000, you're talking about somebody's salary on top of that. So, and the training and everything else that goes with it. So it's a lot more complicated than that. So I'll be voting against.
Okay, thank you. I think that concludes us from talking on the motion. So the motion as proposed by Councillor Hub. Oh, sorry, Councillor Spring. Did you want to speak as the seconder?
Well, our team, Martin Jeans's team, are already using the drones. They're booking the drones, so we have people trained. The police have people trained. I actually don't see the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, and sorry for getting you a seconder. Right. So the motion on the table is that we propose to Cabinet that they look to getting a drone that they could use as part of this. The CPT team could hold and use as part of this nuisance vehicles work. So votes in favour of that going forward? Votes against? And abstentions? So that will go forward as a recommendation to Cabinet. Thank you. Thank you very much. I did have some people that wanted to speak on the main report, so I'm going to move to that now. And the first of those was Councillor Kahili.
Thank you. My question was, what's your preferred way of receiving these reports about these vehicles that are causing a problem? Because it's something that's bubbling up in my ward. So how would you prefer that to come to you, please?
Thank you. Yeah. So we'd prefer them to come through 101 on the live chat, simply because while someone might be reporting what they perceive to be a simple matter, we need to make sure they're amalgamated, filtered through, and also it might trigger certain things, so safeguarding issues that might come from a particular report. If they're received through, for example, the beat officers might not be aware of all the other things that are going on with that person, their neighbour, the bigger picture sort of thing. So 101 is by far the best way.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. And final person that I've got to speak is Councillor Field.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I'm aware that predominantly this is an issue in the part of the borough that around Moat Park, Shepway, Parkwood. I look after Grove Green and Vinces Park as my ward. There's definitely some activity in that area in terms of off-road bikes and quads making their way up Boxley Hill to get up there. But I also wondered, being in a more urban ward, to what degree you're turning your attention under the nuisance vehicle umbrella to small electric vehicles, scooters, and adapted bicycles, a number of which are using public footpaths. And I do have a lot of sympathy for the public, because I think, and for yourselves and the police and community safety, because I think it is hard for people to understand they can go to London, hire one and use it to their heart's content, but not have one of their own in their garage. I think there's some responsibility there in how it's been legislated, but I'd be interested to hear if there's any thoughts from officers and from Mr. Jeans on addressing some of the problems that we do have, not just in urban areas. I know we had a very tragic incident in Coxheath last year, for example, around these types of vehicles as well.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so this is something that I've given direction on myself. Started with e-scooters in the town centre because they're quite dangerous. A good idea in concept, green, all those sorts of things. But I was privy to a couple of police reports where somebody had been hit and injured and all those sorts of things. So we looked at building a toolkit within the town centre, simply because there was quite a few of them. Over a fairly short period, the town team have seized over 120. They've built that toolkit, so they know how to do it effectively and efficiently. That is being rolled out to the beat officers across the rest of the district. It's easier in the town to do that simply because there's more of them. There's CCTV, we can follow up through the businesses, etc. When it's more rural, it's harder because you're relying on people to see it, take a photograph, get an image. We've got to identify that person. And I think this is the bit where the camera that Nick's bought, we might be able to utilise. So if there's a recidivist offender, if you like, in regards to using these, we could actually get the beat officer to go out, get images to assist the prosecution. It's something that the PCC is supporting, which I'm really pleased about. So it is harder. We are doing all that we can. The beat officer's got a clear steer from me on the expectation. We had 3 or 4 reports in the last month in the rural of community highlighting a particular person, and we are going out and we are giving suitable advice, because sometimes these people don't know that it's illegal. So we give them an opportunity to stop doing what they're doing rather than taking their expensive e-scooter, e-bike away. But they get one go at that and one go only before it's seized. But the message is definitely getting out there.
Thank you very much. Right, so thank you for this full report on the item, and we've had our recommendation going forward to Cabinet, but just a reminder that this item was for noting, so can I agree that this is noted? Thank you. Thank you very much. This moves us on to agenda item 13, which is the Community 2025 to 2028 Community Safety Partnership Plan and Strategic Assessment. We've got another officer joining us online as well, so thank you very much for hanging on. We've got Charlotte King, who is the Domestic Abuse and Safeguarding Coordinator. But again, the report will be introduced by Martin Jeans. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I introduce it, would you mind terribly if PC Benson was excused on his day off?
Oh, please, yeah. Have a nice rest of your day. Sorry.
Yeah. No such grace for the district commander and his sergeant, his inspector, unfortunately. Thank you very much for the opportunity to bring this report to this evening. The report outlines the proposed Community Safety Partnership Plan for 2025 to 2028, which is developed by the Safe Maidstone Partnership to address key community safety priorities in the borough. As an evolution of the previous plan, the new plan outlines 5 priorities: preventing violence against women and girls, reducing serious violence, reducing the harm from domestic abuse, keeping children and young people safe, and providing a safe town centre. Alongside these six cross-cutting themes that we use to tackle the root causes of crime and disorder. This plan was supported by the Strategic Assessment 2025, which reflects our evidence-based strategy, our stakeholder engagement, and our public consultation. The report recommends to the committee to endorse the plan to full council for implementation to ensure that compliance of our statutory duties and the fostering of a safer Maidstone for residents and businesses and visitors. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I can't see anybody indicating, but so oh, and I've forgotten actually, sorry, Councillor Cleater, you are here as a visiting member for this item. If you'd like to come forward, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I really do welcome this report and our continued fight to improve safety for women and girls, and especially as it relates to the nighttime economy. And I'm actually very pleased that Councillor Mackay is a member of this committee, because he's also chair of licensing. And I think that gives us the power to actually levy some issues with certain places, establishments around here. It was very, very worrying when the BBC did some testing. We all go into, well, I don't go into clubs anymore, I'm too old, but we all go into venues where they have the Ask Angela posters, they're all up. The problem seems to be when someone tries to do that and the bar staff go, oh, I don't think she's in, love. Or no, there's no Angela here. It's no use having a scheme if the training isn't there for the staff of the establishments. And I think very, very welcome as that scheme is, we have to really make sure that people know about it and are trained on it and understand what to do. And I know, for example, that the Metro Bank, when you go past, that's a safe haven. If you're in trouble, you can go in there and get help. And I think we need to encourage not just pubs and clubs, but actually other venues that are around town to say, actually, if someone feels in trouble, if they feel unsafe, there's a safe haven for them to go to and get some help. And I think that is actually a very joint approach that we as a local authority, that the county council and the police can do. And I know that Martin's team have been doing work in the town, because I actually picked up some of the gizmos you were giving away, and also the community wardens from KCC have been doing a lot of work with their vulnerable clients around this. But I do think we need to be really clear that there's a structured approach to this, and that it isn't something that we do and then it's done. This is something that's going to have to be cyclical and looked at and reported on, and to ensure that if things are put in place, that people know what they should be doing. There's a high turnover of staff in hospitality. That's always a given, you know, young people going to college, etc. So we need to make sure we've got those issues. Also around our licensing of taxis. I know, for example, elsewhere with up in the north of Kent, there's been some issues with Uber drivers who are having some issues with their accreditation, usually because of using somebody else's identity. And I think we've all seen some of the horrific crimes that were committed up in London, not just Uber, black cabs as well, that we really need to say that when we're getting into a taxi or an Uber, that we know that person's been checked and that they're safe. But I really welcome this report. I think it's the start of a long piece of work that we have to do. And I think it's really sad in the 21st century that we're having to do it, but we are. And I think we want to make it a really better place. And we probably need to be linking in with the beach house as well as our sexual assault referral centre, because sometimes people will go there but not want police involvement, but get the necessary health checks done. And I think it's really important that this work carries on. And I know many of the women councillors who were at Housing PAC spoke very eloquently around this, and I think it's something that we need to ensure we're working on. And I know, as an independent custody visitor, that actually the police are doing a lot on this, because I know that when I go and visit, because a lot of the work they're doing, and I know you've been doing particular work around stalking and around domestic violence. So I think we just keep pushing and just make Maidstone a better place. But I'd just like to congratulate people on the report. I'm sure members of the committee will have recommendations or suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I turn to Councillor Higson.
It's a very long report. There's obviously a lot of work gone into it, so thank you for that. I'm a bit unclear though on, I mean, root causes was mentioned, but there isn't really an awful lot about potentially root causes. I know we're very early days in terms of this report, but what do you think some of those root causes are? Do you think it's perhaps cultural? And then what are potential ways in which that can be addressed?
Specifically in relation to violence against women and girls. Oh, how long have we got? Charlotte, I'm conscious that Charlotte's here. So Charlotte is, as was introduced, as our domestic abuse and safeguarding coordinator. Domestic abuse makes up a significant portion of violence against women and girls. Charlotte, as our expert, would you mind taking that question?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. It's an interesting question. And when we think about the root cause about violence against women and girls, there are so many. There are so many root causes. But the main thing that we are thinking about really is that the social norms and the narrative that forms part of that first layer of the violence against women and girls. So when we think about it from a social construct point of view, we want to think about the way in which men and boys are talking about women in the community. They're talking about it with their friends. If that's not challenged on that lower level, and we're thinking about violence against women and girls as a pyramid, that foundation is created and it leads to further violence, to further aggression, to further, and then obviously, you know, we've got our domestic abuse related death reviews, we've got our homicides. So really what we want to be thinking about the root cause of it is that social construct and actually how we challenge the narrative around it. Language is really, really important. So the way in which we're talking about violence in women and girls, the way in which it's presented in the media, and actually shifting the focus really from being that victim blaming, even if it's subconscious, to the conversation of, you know, what are men and boys doing? How are they part of this conversation? How they're forming part of that conversation? And if we can dismantle those social constructs that form part of that misogyny, we're also going to tackle that toxic masculinity as well. So I would say the root cause definitely, from my perspective, is that social construct, the language and the narrative.
Thank you very much. Back to Martin.
Thank you, Charlotte. And just to add to that, when we don't specifically outline some of the root causes within this report, I think actually when you look at the section about keeping children and young people safe, what's unique about that priority in particular is by getting that right, we prevent the other priorities being a factor for those individual children. So much of what happens in early years development in terms of adverse childhood experiences, exposure to harmful behaviours, promotes circumstances whereby young people will take risks unchallenged, often by parents that don't know any better, which leads to a cycle of more increased risk, more increased problem. When we train active bystander, one of the unique elements about the way that we train it in Maidstone is we do a specific piece about understanding and practicing empathy with young people, because we have to take some responsibility as a generation for the environment that we've created for our young people, which is both fantastic in the fact that they've got access to information and facilities and services that we weren't when we were younger. We also gave them devices without any control mechanisms, without fully understanding the world that we were exposing them to. So forgive me, but I think it's a really crude but poignant point. One of the bits that we talk a lot about when we do this training, because it gets a conversation, is we give young people devices on the grounds that they're going to big school, so they need a phone to keep them safe. But we don't have the conversations about what that then gives them access to through social media platforms. And we can put all the filters in the world onto our own children's devices, but if their friends isn't getting their device filtered, it doesn't stop them from then sending on material that's inappropriate. So we have to have more conversations with dads, with parents in general, about teaching their children to understand what is real, because as young men, and there are some men in the room, when we were younger, pornography was a top shelf magazine you might hopefully find in the woods if that was what you were looking for. You're all smiling, so you all agree. Now it's a mobile phone that they were given to for safety. And the problem we have with that is that young people learn from what they're exposed to. So we have a generation of young men going into relationships for the first time, expecting what they've seen online. And the reality is, because of algorithms, because of the way that that software works, they're exposed to very graphic sexual activities when actually probably what they had at the beginning was curiosity, natural, organic, male curiosity. And because it's unchallenged and unfettered, the reality is that they're learning to do things they shouldn't be doing, or asking women to do things they shouldn't be doing. And when it comes to this particular piece of work about understanding the root cause, there's a big part in this around listening. There was a really strong message from ward members, from Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Jenkins Baldock about the need to listen and understand people's own experiences, because we can put the science behind it, we can put the philosophy and the guidance from the work that Charlotte and I do, the bits that fell behind the legislation that we have. But in reality, what is it like to be a woman? Because you and I, or other members of the community that are male, will never know what it's like to walk down the street as a woman. Nor is it realistic to expect us to understand what that feels like. But we can practice empathy and be sympathetic to what that might feel like. And that's part of this journey, is to work to understand what it is as a thing, and how can we work with this generation, the children, so that the next generation will learn. And then, as Maureen quite correctly said, I would disagree. I don't think this is the start of a journey. I think we've been on this pathway for a while, but we've brought it to the forefront now. So there's no excuses. We have a responsibility now to hand this over to the next community safety manager or the next police district commander to say, this is it, we've started it, you carry it on. Because I don't think we'll fix it in my lifetime.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Harper next, and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I was looking through all the papers, and I don't know if it's just me, but at the end of the agenda pack, it finishes on something headed up page 11. But when you look at the index for that appendix, there's other bits not with our papers. So there should be a whole series of appendices and SMP cross-cutting themes, and none of that's been published with our papers we've got before us tonight. So if you go to the end, if you look at the end on page 79, which is the start of the strategic assessment 2025, it's got an index page of what should be there. But when you actually look at what is there, it's not quite the same, seems to me. There seems to be some missing pages in what's been sent out, and that's one thing which can be looked at. The issue which Martin was just talking about, which is clearly one of the most important things for us to be looking at, which is violence against women and girls. I note on the report, in the covering report, that we're talking obviously of the Citizens' Assembly, and it's saying that we're about to engage some consultants to help with that. I was wondering if the officers can give us a time scale on how long the process will take, and when we may be looking to, I suppose, get the responses from the Citizens' Assembly reported back to Overview and Scrutiny, acting as the Crime Disorder Committee, so that we can discuss the outcome of the Citizens' Assembly and potentially endorse the information what's come out, because it's not clear from the report we've got tonight, as to the time scale for that. Another couple of things I spotted, there's quite a few references to the increase in general antisocial behaviour which is occurring in Maidstone, set against a Kent-wide experience, which is the opposite, where it's actually declining. So we seem to have a problem or an issue developing, whereas antisocial behaviour is increasing in Maidstone Borough, whilst at the same time it's reducing elsewhere. And it's not clear, or I might have missed it, as to why we're experiencing in this one authority issues which perhaps aren't being experienced elsewhere, and how we can actually put more resources into addressing it. Because if we are bucking the trend in a negative way, that's something we really need to give consideration to. And my final question is around it's on the young people section. So it's page 61, I think, which is in terms of safeguarding. It says create safe spaces and affordable diversion activities for young people, particularly teens, blah, 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 in collaboration with sports club and community organisations. But I think, as most of us know, that over the last 10 years plus, one of the biggest areas of cuts and withdrawal of services, not just in Maidstone, not just in Kent, but across the whole of the UK, has been services for teenagers, youth clubs, youth services. I mean, they virtually don't exist now. Or if they do, it's only in a few places. So I'm just wondering, you know, whilst, yes, we do need to create safe spaces, as we're saying, but how, you know, we're starting off from a very low level. And I just, you know, there's nothing in the report telling us the types of things needed to do to actually achieve that. Because I would have thought if we're looking at, yeah, almost reinstating youth centres or that type of approach, there's a massive cost to both Maidstone and Kent County Council. And we just need to be aware of it, or we need to be doing some work which would lead us to understand the impacts of it. So those are my questions on this at the moment. Thank you.
Over to Martin. Thank you.
Okay, I think I got all of those, and if I don't, I apologise, because we were trying to answer some of them while you were speaking. So if I do miss one, please do point it out. Regarding the agenda, well spotted. We will look into what's happened there. And going back to your point, Councillor Higson, there's a 70-page strategic assessment report that's not in the appendices that would have made that report even longer. So apologies for that. And unfortunately, within that is a great deal more narrative around why these priorities have come forward. And I'm happy to share that with members of the committee retrospectively, and apologies for that oversight. In terms of the point around creating the safe spaces, there was a conscious decision within the Safe Maidstone Partnership Group, which includes speaking to the Kent Youth Provision, which has moved towards a family hub model and doesn't have as much of a youth outreach model currently, because it's more targeted youth outreach as opposed to the youth clubs that you referenced. And part of the reason for putting into the report the need to find safe spaces that aren't funded by local government is that we have a history of cutting that service. So if we are going to provide for our young people, we need sustainable youth provisions that aren't government or local authority funded, because as you quite rightly pointed out, they're one of the first things to get cut, and we'll just leave another generation of young people without anything. And I'd much rather spend time with local businesses, local charities, trying to create a sustainable youth provision. We began work, although we've put it on pause for the time being, around creating a skate park, an indoor skate park within the town centre. which we will hope to get national lottery funding for. But that's a significant investment of resources for something that may or may not happen. So we have to balance that up against the kind of the other corporate needs. The question about antisocial behaviour, I'm going to ask Steve to cover that, because we have a theory around that.
Thank you, Martin. So an interesting one, this one. Really interested in ASB, and I take great pride in the way I run my team. Martin and I, when we first got together 3.5, 4 years ago now, we discussed about how we're going to break up the district so we can police it effectively for the communities, which includes ASB. We do ward clusters. Most of you are probably cited on that. And we are unique. We're the only district in the whole of the force that does it. I don't know why others don't. We cluster up nearby wards, so 21 wards in Maidstone. They all fit into 7 clusters. Each cluster has at least 1 beat officer, sometimes 2, depending on how busy they are. And my stance is the officers come on duty, they do the minimum amount of paperwork, and they go out. And the idea is that they are front-facing community engagement and targeted activity. ASB has gone up, and this is my theory, ASB has gone up in district because we have been out there. And I genuinely mean that. I come in the morning, within an hour, the office is empty because officers are out and about. So the way that we've set up, the way that we use the clusters does, you know, I often get asked by my senior management team, what's happening with the ASB? Well, we're going out there, we're asking people and we're tackling it. There is a spike in Maidstone, but I would rather not shy away from it, and I would rather tackle it for the medium and long-term goals. The increase is 14.7% rolling year. Rolling quarter, I'm starting to see some gains on this, is minus 12.09%. And for the month of February, it's minus 30.9. Now, the weather will have helped us in that. You know, there are other factors in this, but this is very much a case of us getting out there and doing it. 2 other examples I can give you. We've already spoken about Optiplete. That created 440 calls in a 3-month period, which is a huge amount in a percentage, if you want to put it in that measure. And the same with Opossum, that was 240 calls. So when you total those together, that is accounted for a huge portion. And that's how I'm able to explain to my senior leadership team, including the bloke to my left, as to why our ASB has gone up. It is simply because we are out there. If we didn't do what we do, and if we didn't go out and target these, I could quite happily sit here and tell you that ASB's gone down this year, you know, but that's not what I'm about. I'd rather hit it head on.
My other question was more towards the officers, was around the timetable for the Citizens' Assembly timescale in terms of the work on violence against women and girls. Obviously, I can see it started, as it says in sort of paragraph 213. I was wondering, if you like, how long the process will take, because presumably at the end of it, once we've undertaken a Citizens' Assembly, it would need to report back to presumably, I don't know, this committee or to somewhere, so that you know, the outcomes can be discussed. I just wondered what, you know, are we looking at 6 months, a year? Yeah, just get a feel for it.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Well, we've got a star cast here tonight. So we've got our Director of Insight and Governance, Angela Woodhouse. So she's going to take that question, if you don't mind.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. So yes, we have, and Councillor Wilkinson has been involved as well behind the scenes, which has been really helpful. So in terms of timetable, we're looking at the outcome from the Citizens' Assembly coming out around end of October into November, and we're going to programme in Scrutiny. It's really important that this committee is involved in the findings of that before it goes to Cabinet. So we've included you in the programme, and we've got several members involved as we're developing, but I'm more than happy to come back and report as it's progressing and keep you all updated.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wilkinson next, please.
Thank you. Again, I want to commend you on the report and all the hard work that you've put into it. I was shocked to see the statistic of 87% of women feel unsafe in the Maidstone Town Centre, which is quite shocking, really. But that means that kind of time is of the essence. I'm on the subcommittee with my colleague, Councillor Jenkins Baldock, and that's going to take, as you said, about till the end of the year. So there is other stuff in here that possibly could be mitigated before then, possibly because of, you know, the time span. Oh, and I just wanted to ask something else as well, sorry. Have you got any statistics on the spiking, reports of spiking in the past year within the town centre, and what establishments are the main offenders with that?
Not with me. It's an interesting crime type. It's not always clear what it was. We didn't actually get a chance to, or didn't actually speak up at the time about Councillor Cleater's concern around the FOI. We don't know when that FOI was actually run in comparison to when the BBC did their report. There was, as far as we understand it, a bit of a gap between when they asked and when they didn't. And when Maidstone establishments were asked, we had a very good return of businesses. I think 14 out of 15 town centre premises all confirmed that they understood, and that included door staff, some of which whose first language wasn't English, were all aware of the importance of Ask Angela. I can't provide you the figures on spiking. Or what I have is anecdotal, which you've heard before, so I won't share with you now. The figure around the 87%, yeah, it's pretty shocking. The town centre, we're working really hard through the town centre task force to change that narrative. It is, because of the way that it is used by some people, an intimidating environment. We might not ever be able to change that fully, but whilst the Citizens Assembly will help us structure our violence against women and girls strategy, it won't stop us continuing to deliver the work around this particular priority. The working group will be the officers working group with our partners will be established. Charlotte and others will play a key role within that. And the report to licensing will be brought forward by John Littlemore and his team in relation to both the taxis and the establishment licensing that was raised. So we won't stop doing what we're doing. We're confident in our understanding of the problem. The point of the Citizens Assembly is a public checks and balances check, much like you guys provide for us tonight in your role as Crime and Disorder Committee. It's important, actually, I should mention very quickly, the ward clusters that Steve mentioned. As far as I know, we're still the only Kent authority that uses clusters. I think we're the only borough in the country that uses clusters. And that only came about because we felt that overview and scrutiny back in 2012, 20 or 20 something, might have been 2019. We didn't feel that you guys were understanding what we were doing enough. So we created ward clusters to improve our engagement as a partnership with you as ward members, which I hope you all appreciate. But it actually now has become the bedrock of how we police the borough as well. So I think is kudos to both you guys as the scrutiny and your predecessors, but also us to recognise the need to take a different approach. And, you know, I think this is one of the best community safety partnerships in the South East, if not the country. So I would say that.
Just ask, is it possible to get a report about the figures for spiking and the establishments that are the main offenders?
I will ask my police colleagues to provide something which I'll provide to you.
If you wouldn't mind circulating that by email to the rest of the overview and scrutiny, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Of course.
Moving on, I've got Councillor Field, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to add to the comments commending you on the report. I know that this is a long-standing relationship between the borough and the police. I think it's been very productive, and it's great to see the evolution here. My question, relatively simple question, I have no idea how complex the answer will be. On page 66, a term that I'm just unfamiliar with, trauma-informed public health approach. I wondered if we could have just a little bit more context of that and what the operational reality of those words actually is in terms of what officers and community safety staff would be doing on the ground. Thank you.
We didn't rehearse this earlier, but Charlotte, would you mind taking the trauma-informed question?
It's incredibly important that we're moving forward with all of our services, especially our frontline services, operationally, strategically, with a trauma-informed approach. And that's looking at things through a lens of, if someone's experiencing trauma, it's reframing how we engage with them and how we engage with a community as a whole. So thinking about not what is wrong with that person or not what is wrong with that community, but actually what has happened to them. So it goes back to Martin's comments about that kind of root cause of violence against women and girls. You know, a lot of the root causes of ASB, it's around that kind of generational beliefs and those generational learnt behaviours and the trauma that somebody may have experienced or a collection may have experienced that then is leading to behaviours that are presenting as challenging or is presenting as not being able to engage with services fully. What being trauma-informed does is it allows that resilience. So we're not getting a revolving door coming through of the same people coming through, the same problems, same patterns emerging. And it's getting to the root of something as opposed to, you know, putting a plaster over it and expecting things to change. We as the professionals need to change the way in which we're working to have that systemic change moving forward. So the way that looks operationally is that we are looking at the way in which we are creating environments. So for example, I work within the housing directorate for Maidstone Borough Council, and our housing building is set up to be trauma informed. So we don't have screens, we don't have security, we don't have walkie-talkies. And immediately somebody who is perhaps experienced trauma and is presenting as being quite challenging to other professionals comes to our environment and they immediately feel at ease. They're not feeling threatened as soon as they walk through the door. So we're setting things up for them not to fail before they even engage with the service. And it's really important when we look at it from that generational point of view. It's really important we think about that preventative work, which really is at the heart of this, you know, of this whole document, and of the work that we're doing is that preventative work. And as Martin said, we're not going to see change for many things within our lifetime, certainly within our career, but that preventative work and that trauma-informed lens is incredibly important to allow us to do that for the next generation. And I think I've waffled there, so apologies for that.
No, thank you very much. That was very good detail. I'm not sure.
Not at all. I'm grateful for the response.
Thank you. Right, so just a couple of things from the chair, which is that the full report was published online. So if you looked at your papers online, you had the whole strategic assessment. There is so the strategic assessment was all the evidence, which then informs the community safety partnership plan, which is going forward to 2028. And I've seen a couple of mini refreshers of this over the years, but this is the first time I've seen the full thing redone. And I think it's actually a really clear document. And I know that it goes to other partners as well. So I think it's very good to see what the 5 pillars are, you know, as we go forward to other partners with that. So that's excellent. But on that basis, because of obviously we do have the missing pages in our papers, our recommendations are on page 34. I'm going to slightly amend number 1. So it says that the committee notes the summary of the strategic assessment and its findings, which are page 43 to 47, which provides the evidence base for the priorities and themes in the proposed community safety plan 2025-28, just to cover those that perhaps didn't look online or read in paper form. Is that agreed? I just changed the wording on that. Thank you. So, okay, now we need to do the vote then, just with that wording. So with that wording for number 1, we've got the following recommendations to the committee. We've noted the summary of the strategic assessment. Number 2, we agree the draft community safety plan for recommendation to full council. And number 3, we're going to authorise the Director of Strategy, Insight and Governance to finalise it, make any minor amendments for spellings and things in consultation with the chair of the committee. Can I take it that those 3 recommendations are agreed? Oh, we might need a seconder. Yeah, so I propose it from the chair and second the vice chair, Councillor Field. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for your time today, and thank you very much for remoting in as well. That concludes our first part of the meeting. So I declare that the Overview and Scrutiny Acting as the Crime Disorder Committee meeting is now closed. As we've been going for over an hour, I'll just suggest a 10 minute comfort break if we could come back at 8:05 to start the next meeting. And thank you so much for Sue King for hanging on. We'll be back with you at 8:05. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm pleased. Hello, everybody. Could we come to order? Councillor Mackay. Councillor Mackay, we're starting. Start again. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny. Pleased to welcome you to this second meeting of the committee tonight. Meetings broadcast live, recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? I look to Councillor Mackay.
I was, right, Chair.
Lucky you were listening, then you got that bit. Councillor Wilkinson as well, yeah. I just asked so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. If we have the fire alarm this time, please stay seated. Members of Democratic Services are going to assess the situation, give you further instructions on evacuation if needed. Item number 1, apologies for absence. I've still got Councillor Cannon and Councillor Parfitt. Notifications for substitute members. I've still got Councillor Spooner for Councillor Cannon and Councillor Springett for Councillor Parfitt. We don't have any urgent items at item 3, but there has been an update to item 15, which was the planning enforcement review. So the wording for the suggested draft recommendation 4 was slightly changed. It's the one pager that should have been on your desks. So bear that in mind when we're looking at that item. Item 4, I can't see any visiting members now. And item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? Can't see anybody indicating. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying? Can't see anybody indicating. Item 7, I move that all items be taken in public. Is this agreed? Item 8 is the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 12th of March, which is pages 1 to 5 in your agenda packs. Are there any comments on the accuracy of these minutes? Nope. So I move the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of March be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Lovely. Thank you very much. Item 9, we don't have any petitions. Item 10, we don't have any questions from local residents. And item 11, we haven't got any questions from members. Now, if the committee will allow, I'm just going to move the running order around slightly. So we're going to take item 15 before 12, 13 and 14. And that is because we've kindly got our Senior Enforcement Officer, Sue King, online, and she's been waiting since before the previous meeting. And she's actually on annual leave today. So if we can, so thank you very much for joining us, Sue. And we're going to move to item 15, which was our planning enforcement review. So as requested by the committee from our last meeting, this item's now been presented with all the evidence provided so far, along with some suggested draft recommendations. We've got some new updated data to reflect the loss of the investigator post, and we've got a copy of the new draft local enforcement plan, along with the summary of the changes. As I said, Sue King, the planning enforcement team leader, is briefly in attendance virtually to answer any queries. I would ask that we could possibly conclude queries to Sue within half an hour period so that she can get away. So that will be queries to Sue finished by 20 to 9. So the committee are being asked to provide any feedback on the suggested draft recommendations and obviously any amendments or additions before this will then go forward to Cabinet. Right, so anyone want to kick us off? Can't see anybody. Oh no, Councillor Springett.
No, I was very pleased with this report. I thought it was a very good information document. The only thing I'm just concerned about is in the report on pages 46 and 47. It's hinting quite clearly that our KPIs are falling on enforcement, and I'm just worried. I'm just worried about the morale within the team, really. I know the team's very busy, and Sue King, your team are doing an excellent job, by the way. I'm just afraid that with us allowing the enforcement team to be one short, we're just heading in the wrong direction, and I'm really concerned. I just want to flag that up. I think enforcement is important. If we're not seen to enforce, people will just take the mick. I think enforcement is very important. Page 47, it says the team has to change its focus and increase the number of cases that would be expedient to enforce, i.e. fight less battles. To close cases quicker, we would have to increase the flexibility of what officers consider as not expedient to enforce. That means we're not going to pursue all the enforcement issues that come in. And I think that's terrible. I think that's really terrible. I think we need to be giving a strong appearance to the public that we do enforce. If you do things wrong in the planning system, we'll enforce it. So I want that message to be out there. And I don't want this to, oh no, we're a bit too busy to enforce that. And I think the team are doing a marvellous job, but it just really concerns me. I mean, I went through the enforcement tracker that us councillors can see. And I don't know, we've got an admin person as part of the team. Does that admin person update the enforcement tracker? Because when I look at it, in some wards, I've got cases from 2017, 2018, and there's been no update for 2 years. Just looking in say North Ward, for example, these are quite recent ones, but 11th of Jan 23, the report was made. 8th of Feb 23, responding to Councillor Harwood's complaint, notice issued. We're 2 years on from that. So if the notice was issued, something should have happened. Why is it still sitting there 2 years down the line? And I can give you so many examples of this where I've been through all the different cases, and they're just going on for, we've got 2019, Detling and Thurnham, a report in March 2019. There's been no update on it since January 2021. Now, is that because the thing we can access is not being updated, or are these all sitting, festering in a corner because we haven't got enough staff to pursue them? So I've got quite a lot of concerns. The report is really good and the enforcement issue is fabulous, but I think underneath the surface, our little ducks are paddling really fast, but they're not going very fast forwards. So Sue, please, I'm not criticising. I think your team are doing a marvellous job. I think you need to be better resourced, but I would like to know if perhaps a lot of the cases that I'm seeing that have no update for 2 or 3 years, is that because our thing isn't updated, or are they sitting festering?
It is a mixture of things, Val. It's not our admin person that updates that. It's the case officers individually. As they do something on the case, they should be updating a certain box. And we did have this pulled up in our training just recently, that I noticed that people weren't updating that box. We have a whole series of boxes in uniform, which is a replacement of our paper files, so to speak. So we don't put everything in the box that the councillors can see. And I had just recently in a training session told the team that they need to update that with key specific points. However, there are a number, and one that you mentioned, that a notice was served 2 years ago. If a notice was served 2 years ago and there's no further update, that is because it's with PINS, with the Planning Inspectorate, and we're still waiting for the appeal. So there will be several like that. But we do have a few still festering, and we have quite a few that are enforcement, and we are trying to prosecute. And the process between an enforcement notice becoming, after it's all gone through the appeal process, and then becomes outstanding that we can prosecute, it's the prosecution process that takes a long time because of gathering the evidence and working with the legal team to progress the prosecutions through.
Okay, so where I've got one, for example, in Headcorn that was, I don't know if it's okay, I won't mention locations, but there was one October 21, and the latest information on there says hearing set for July 24, pending consideration. So I'd have thought we'd have had a result from that hearing by now, and it would be nice if it had the outcome there, and if it's gone to PINS, it would be really helpful.
Yes, I mean, I would have to know what the case is to give you an answer on that. But if you ping that to me in an email, I will certainly update you on that one and let you know the reason why, because I'd be interested to know why that hasn't been updated in some way.
Yeah, it's just a shame, because it just means we have to keep emailing your team to say, what's happening with that? What's happening with that? Whereas if we could just keep this more up to date, we can look and we go, oh, yes, I know what's happening. And that will save a lot of workload coming to you, but I am concerned that you are one down in your team, and I'm batting for your side at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Harper next.
Yeah, it's not so much a question for Sue, but it's on that same point which Val just mentioned on number 3 on page 19. This is about the frozen investigator be reassessed. And given that we're now in, when we were looking at this, the new financial year is now, we're in that year. So we need to delete the reference to new financial year in both the potential recommendations and the reason, because otherwise it looks like we're going to push it off another 12 months before we start looking into it. And if the opportunity comes up, I would have thought during this current financial year, and obviously we get quarterly reports and all the rest of it, then, you know, the earliest opportunity we should look to reinstate the post, because I mean, going through the information again, as Val said this afternoon, you know, it's just a lot of evidence where clearly that having the post frozen is having a negative impact on the service. So, yeah, I just think we should definitely look on that one as fast as we can do with our colleagues elsewhere.
Thank you. Councillor Kahili.
Thank you. Mine's in the same vein. On page 20, you can see that the number of cases received have gone up and those closed have gone down, which again is not a criticism, Sue. It's just if you need to have that post unfrozen and have that person in, because it says here, consequently in dealing with day-to-day cases to achieve the KPI means that senior officers are having less time to deal with more contentious cases which require notices and prosecutions. And I'm sure you can all think of cases in your ward where that senior officer is needed. I can think of several. I think, so obviously I won't name them, but Sue knows what I'm referring to, that need the expert people to get in and solve that case, because it's ongoing and it's been ongoing for several years. And yeah, I'm not spending money willy-nilly here, but if that is that frozen, it's a false economy.
Thank you. I just wanted to check, because obviously this is us doing the report as a committee rather than when we did it as the working groups before. The enforcement tracker is something that's been around for a little while, but I wanted to check with members of the committee. Do you know what it is, how to look at it, how to use it? Just nods. So maybe another thing that we could think about for the draft recommendations, as well as obviously what seemed to come out there was making sure we keep the enforcement tracker up to date, maybe a refresh on the training for members of how we use it for our wards and what kind of things it shows us. I think that would be really useful, because then also that might stop perhaps the email traffic as well to the different enforcement officers. So it might then free some of them up to then get on with the, you know, the more enforcement stuff. Councillor Springett.
And just another thing, I remember sitting in a committee, goodness knows how many years ago, discussing, and I will mention the name, Pilgrim's Retreat, which is an interesting situation. I've heard nothing about that for years, and we've also got, I think it was Bell Lane, which is in Boxley Parish, which went to the High Court. So that was publicised because it went to the High Court. Could members have an update on some of the really slightly higher profile, very long lasting cases, if possible? They were in the press, so that's why I've mentioned the names. Thank you.
I can give you a Bell Lane one right now, if that would help, because it will be in the press fairly shortly. We're doing a site visit on Thursday, which is multi-agency with police, RSPCA, Environment Agency, Community Protection, Enforcement, external legal people, to see whether Mr. Langley Beck is there. The committal is now being issued, and well, he was committed but with a suspended sentence, but because nothing has been cleared, the power of arrest is out for him to be arrested. but it doesn't clear the site. So that is the next thing that needs to that we need to find out how to do. Unfortunately, with enforcement, with planning, the only option we have is direct action, and we're talking possibly £1 million to clear the site and replant. So it is it's an old case that's been festering along. It's because it's been very, very complex, but there is a joint visit happening on Thursday with several multiple agents.
Okay, I'm probably going to steer clear of going into individual
Yeah,
enforcement cases.
I won't do any others, just that will be in the press in the next week or so.
Thank you. You were making me a bit nervous there. So we're just thinking about our draft recommendations, which will obviously go forward to Cabinet to have a look at, and then we'll do the scrape process like we've done with the others. So is everyone familiar with the potential recommendations? I don't know, do we want to go through them separately? I think that might be an idea, just so that we know what we're recommending. So we've got number one is obviously to continue to offer the training to the parish councils on planning enforcement general information and the processes, and we're going to extend that same training to members. I've had feedback from my parish councils that that's been really beneficial, so I think a lot of them have undertaken the full thing, but maybe the odd refresh, and then again to extend that to members. So are we happy as a committee? I propose that that goes forward as a potential recommendation to Cabinet to have a look at. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Harper. And can I have votes in favour of that one? Okay, that's unanimous, thank you. And then we'll have a look at number two, which is that any upcoming reports that are relating to the progress of the local enforcement plan be brought to this committee. Now, I think this has been somewhat overtaken by events, because we have the draft local enforcement policy that will obviously hopefully be voted through shortly within our papers. So I would actually propose that we don't take this one forward to Cabinet, because it's just nonsensical. We've got the draft in here. So I propose that we don't take this forward. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Field. And has everyone agreed that we don't take this recommend forward? Okay, so that's that one gone. And then potential recommendation number three is that the frozen investigator post be reassessed. Obviously, we need to change the wording on this, because obviously what's happened is events have overtaken us again with our recommendation. So I propose that we change that to the frozen investigator post be reassessed full stop. Have I got a seconder for that?
Could we add as a matter of urgency for that, potentially? Thank you.
We could add as a matter of urgency. I'm happy to take that on board. Are you as the seconder, Councillor Harper? And can I have votes in favour of that recommendation? And against? And abstentions? Thank you, that goes forward. And then the fourth recommendation is that the methods of enforcement in the case of breaches of conditions in large developments be reviewed, but just the reasoning on this is altered. So this is your one pager. So it's how we can increase the issue of breach of condition notices on large developments. And then the reasons that have been given by our head of development management are in that middle box. Is everyone? I propose that that goes forward as a recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Spooner, votes in favour. Councillor Cook, are you voting? Votes in favour. Votes against? And abstentions? That was unanimous. And then from what our discussion earlier and what Sue King helped us with, I'm minded to add a fifth, but it'll actually be fourth because we've deleted one, but never mind. Fifth recommendation to the table, which is to keep the enforcement tracker up to date and to have a refresh training for members on how we can use that for our wards and we get the most effective information from that. Have I got a seconder for that? Councillor Harper. And votes in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you ever so much. So that concludes our planning enforcement review topic, and we look forward to the next year, where we're obviously going to have our workshop in May, so we can start thinking about new topics that we might like to do in overview and scrutiny, and we're going to have some facilitation with that, so we can get energised for the next new year. Thank you so much, Sue. Please enjoy the rest of your annual leave and thank you for joining us. That moves us on to item 12, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan, pages 6 to 10 of your agenda packs. Anyone want to raise any? Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I just remember at our last meeting, there was a number of items we wanted to consider for pre-decision making scrutiny, and with the timescales, we'd missed the boat, as it were. But looking at this, there's a couple which I wonder whether we might want to, in June, look at pre-decision making scrutiny, and one of which is on page 9, the last one on page 9, which is the Maidstone Community Safety Partnership Plan. Just bearing in mind the discussions we've just had as the Crime Disorder Committee talking about.
Just going to come in there because that is what we just had earlier. So this is the date it's going to go for the decision, but that was the item that we had earlier when we were sitting as crime and disorder. So
okay,
yeah, carry on.
The second one then was actually the next one down, which was Maidstone House and linked decarbonisation. I'm just thinking because obviously it was called in the previous report by overview and scrutiny. I'm just thinking because it's a very topical issue, I was going to say controversial, but topical issue. I just wonder if it might make sense for that to come here for pre-decision scrutiny, rather than ended up potentially being a call-in, which just delays the process.
I'm happy to have another look at that and re-second it, see how much it costs this time. Is anyone in favour of bringing that in for pre-decision scrutiny? Councillor Field, do you want to come in?
I just feel like we're in danger of scrutinising the same thing over and over again on this one. I understand and support the whole pre-scrutiny process, but in this particular instance, it's a construction project. It's not going to start 5 minutes after the cabinet decision. And it's gone before numerous packs. It's gone before this committee. I think my view is that the time has come to let this process run, see what cabinet is presented with. Should it be necessary to call it in post-decision, I think all of us have suspicions about what the decision may be in any case. On this occasion, I think we should probably let this one go. Thank you.
It depends how we see our role, doesn't it? I suppose it's whether we think we could help, but then we did try and look at it in pre-decision scrutiny last time to help, and then we ended up in call-in anyway. So then that does make it longer. I see that point as well. And equally, or do we just let the decision be made and then look at it and go to call-in? I mean, if it's obviously not what we would like. Having said that, I don't know, it's run on for quite a long time now, to be honest, but it is an expensive item. It might not be when it comes back. Depends on how we see our role, really. But I'm going to take Councillor Mackay and Councillor Cook on this.
Initially, when I remember reading the newspapers, I thought this is an awful lot of money to spend on very little. And also with the reorganisation of local government, I thought maybe we're being a bit premature. But the more I think about it, when West Kent Authority is finally established, it is highly likely, I suspect, that instead of having one central building as KCC have in Maidstone, it will be dispersed, as is a lot of our processes now. And we need high quality buildings to accommodate staff. The other thing is, even if it is sold, tenants nowadays expect high quality buildings to a high, So, and I agree with what Rob says. We've looked at this over and over again. So let it go forward. Let's see what Cabinet have to say. We need to look after our estate and we need to look after our employees. And if we want Maidstone to play an active role in the administration of West Kent Unitary Authority, then we need the accommodation, the right accommodation here available. That is my view. We should let it go.
Councillor Cook.
Just on the process, Madam Chairman, if I might, because I think with pre-scrutiny you have a much better opportunity to influence outcomes. To say let's let this one go and then we maybe call it in. If you want to call it in later, you are limited by virtue of what you can actually do. You can ask the cabinet to reconsider. You could maybe refer it to council, but then council don't have the final say on that. It's one of the democratic deficiencies, if I can use that, of the system that we're now employing here, rather than the committee system. So I would actually support having another look before it's too late, whilst we can actually still influence the outcome. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, and I think that was really well put. It's shaping or catching, as I see it, really. Councillor Higson.
As chair of the climate transition pack, this is going to drag on because there is the cost of the materials and the workforce is just it's just not possible at this time. So it's going to be a very long road.
I think this is the awkward thing with our setup, isn't it? So, the packs don't do pre-decision scrutiny, and, maybe would that we had a slightly different system, but that's not the constitution that we run. I mean, we've got a motion on the table. I'll just take it to the vote. We've got a motion on the table, we've got a proposer, and we've got a seconder. So votes in favour of having a look at this one for the Maidstone House and linked decarbonisation to come in here for pre-decision scrutiny. Votes in favour? And against? Okay, so that one will run straight through, and then we'll look to do whatever overview and scrutiny does after that vote's gone. Thank you. Nothing else on the forward plan? Anyone wants to raise? No. Great, so I move that be noted. Is that agreed? That moves us on to our work programme, item 13, the committee work programme, and obviously we're just finishing that off. So the only thing really to note on that is that we're going to have a work programme workshop in May. The date is still to be confirmed because we've just got to fit it in with all other meetings. It's looking like it might be the 27th of May, but Democratic Services will let us know. Any other comments on that? No. So I move that be agreed. Is that agreed? Okay, so now we move on to item 14, which was where we got a little bit keen. So we thought we'd miss a step previously with our previous Section 106 and community infrastructure levy review item. But now what's happened is we sent our recommendations to Cabinet. They had a look at them in their meeting, and then they sent back their action and implementation plan back to us. So we just need to look at that last box now and see what we think about what they said to our recommendations. So our recommendation was, again, offering training to councillors and parish councillors about SEAL, about the general and the non-strategic SEAL and the neighbourhood SEAL, and we're going to have some fact sheets. And they've said that they're going to do some in-person training dates, they're going to include Q&As, they're going to have the focus on training on making the forms as easily understandable as reasonably possible, and advising on the legal position. So I propose that we're happy with what they've said to that recommendation. Is that agreed? Agreed. The second one that we put forward was to update the council website. We're going to make SIL and Section 106 more easy to understand, and we're going to give some neighbourhood plan guidance and request that we recirculate that to parishes as a refresher if they want to start their neighbourhood plan, and perhaps they're a smaller parish. So they're updating the web pages as we speak. And then they'll be uploaded by the end of April. So, and the neighbourhood planning web pages that then be upgraded after that. So I propose that we accept their action and implementation on that one. Do I have a seconder? Is that agreed? Lovely. Our third one that we put forward was that, which came off the back of speaking to Highways, was that they preferred the Section 278 agreements for gaining strategic road infrastructure alongside planning developments. But that's gone forward and obviously been reviewed by our Head of Development Management. And it's come back that those agreements are between Kent County Council and the applicant only. So they could only be used really when we're in close proximity to an application site and we've got a Grampian style planning condition imposed. So whilst we would like those, there doesn't seem to be a mechanism for actually writing that in unless we can get it right next to it with the Grampian planning condition. Councillor Harper, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I thought that we'd also somewhere recommended, I can't see it here, so there was a discussion as to recommending that we move away from use of SIL apart from for small developments, and that we move back to Section 106 agreements. And whilst obviously there's a reference to moving away from SIL to Section 278 for highways, I can't see the reference. Perhaps it didn't get taken up in the end about moving away from the SIL, apart from for small developments, to Section 106s. I missed it when we were discussing this previously, but I do remember that discussion being had when we were doing our interviewing with Kent County Council officers, not just highways. I mean, obviously, if we didn't pick it up at the time, it's too late now, but I know we had that discussion in a meeting.
I'm just going to track back with the aid of Democratic Services for our recommendations, because obviously we've done our recommendations, we've sent them to Cabinet, they've given their response. So if we can't add any new recommendations now, we're essentially done, but I will just track back through that and come back to you in a minute, but I think that's where we are with that. Councillor Mackay.
I would have to say I concur with Councillor Harper. That's my recollection. I agree with him. That's what I remember being discussed. But anyway, as you say, it's gone forward. It is yesterday. Today is today. Let's move forward.
Okay, let's pause recommendation 3 for a minute then. We'll move on to have a look at recommendation 4, which was that we requested the Cabinet press Kent County Council for more regular and detailed updates on the allocation of the Section 106 seal developer funds and the select monies. The action implementation that's come back from that is to utilise the Joint Transportation Board for updates on all transport matters. I personally, having chaired the JTB for a long time and having had this as a standing item for a very long time on the agenda, I'm actually not sure that that is going to be as useful as the paper that it's written on. But I'm going to bring Councillor Hickson in on this one.
Hello. Okay, as a member of JTB. This one's really important because it's transpired that KCC have spent money for a development that actually the money was supposed to be for Maidstone, but it was in Tunbridge and Moreland. So this one's a really, really important one that we stress.
Okay, so we need to. Oh, Councillor Harper.
Have we got the ability to go back to the Cabinet and ask them to look at this again? Because if so, I would request that perhaps we do, given as Councillor Hickson just pointed out, that and the other thing is the Joint Transport Board has a tendency over the last year or two of being cancelled more times than it's been held, and therefore if we're going to be reliant on a committee which only meets infrequently and it's only timetable to meet about 4 times a year, we're not actually going to get much information flowing through. So I would ask that we request the Cabinet to look at getting the information and thinking of a different way to disseminate it to Maidstone councillors. because we do need to make sure it's coming through on a regular basis so that all councillors are aware of how this money is being spent. When we were discussing this, there was very large sums of money previously handed over to Kent, and I think it's just been pointed out, we're now aware that some of it's been spent outside of Maidstone Borough. And to rely on JTB, whilst no disrespect to JTB, but a number of times it has been cancelled in the last 2 years, is more than it's been held.
So we just have to be like cognitive of how this works. So we sent our recommendations, it's gone to Cabinet, they've had a look at our recommendations and they've come back and said, this is what we're doing with those recommendations. We can't continually run that loop. But having said that, if you look at the bottom bit, it says that, oh, hang on, being given advice. Okay, so I was just going to say the second bit, which was that it says at one point there was a strategic infrastructure group between senior KCC, NBC officers and councillors, including MP and other community stakeholders, and it became ineffective and it stopped. However, efforts could be made to revitalise it. So I think they are offering that. And then what's been just pointed out to me is that we could bring Councillor Harwood as the Cabinet member for planning here to ask him about why he's said that action and implementation. And obviously we could probably press the point about revitalising this new group, because I really don't think that JTB is going to provide any useful way forward on this. So I would propose on this one that we do ask Councillor Harwood back to come and have a talk about the action and implementation. But I had Councillor Field who had indicated to speak. So do you want to do that now?
Yeah, I think I'd echo sentiments around the Joint Transportation Board. It feels to me this is a long-standing issue. It's been dealt with by cabinets of different stripes. This authority is not being treated with due respect by the County Council. They have chosen to refuse to provide this information on numerous occasions. I think with regard to your suggestion about the Cabinet member, rather than ask him to come to another meeting, perhaps you and I could just write and ask that he formally writes on behalf of the committee, if that would satisfy members, rather than Councillor Harwood come and have to listen to us ask him and then do that anyway. Might save a little time and be a bit more direct. I think that's probably what I would personally say we do with the recommendation. We've got the meeting in May where we'll look at what this committee might do going forward. Given as what I've said about what's preceded this particular issue, I think it's time where we start perhaps asking democratic services and legal services what mechanisms can be pulled against a highways authority that simply refuses to explain what it has done with money secured through the planning process in a more formal way than simply exercising Cabinet members' right to send polite letters and inviting them to a transportation board that I understand why they don't want to send officers to 12 different transportation boards, but so on and so forth. But on the recommendation, perhaps we just do that and ask Councillor Harwood to write. I suspect we all know what will happen.
Councillor, that sounds very sensible. Councillor Cook had indicated to speak, so I'm going to go to him next.
Just briefly, Madam Chairman, on that, I suspect that some people from KCCs would say that the disrespect was coming from both sides. I think the way that Maidstone has approached the decision-making authority of KCC as the Highways Authority in the way that it's been challenged by this authority in the past was disrespectful as well, and it has been challenged. In terms of where the future of the JTB, this is something that's been discussed at county at length. There are one or two of the JTBs throughout the county that operate incredibly well. So there is not reluctance on the part of KCC to disperse information. There are a couple of JTBs that sadly don't work very well, and Maidstone's one of those. Now, I think that what needs to happen, given that where we are in April and what's happening in 3 weeks' time, is to wait and see what happens with the outcome of the election, and then Maidstone should request a meeting with the new authority and whoever is running KCC after the 1st of May, and establish a way of moving forward whereby we can both respect each other and work together for the betterment of the residents of Maidstone. Now, in terms of that strategic setup that was which involved both of the MPs as well. The background to that, as officers may recall, was that followed a public meeting of over 500 people that were supporting a call for a Leeds Langley relief road, something that strongly supported at that time. And there was, the idea was that the MPs were created this group to bring together both sides to find ways of advancing that proposal for a Leeds Langley relief road. Now, I think that sort of wilted on the vine after a while. But as we know, that's not something that's been other than in the local plan last time, where it was taken out because there wasn't sufficient evidence by the inspector, not because he didn't think it was a good idea, because there wasn't the evidence there. The money was then put forward to develop that argument, and sadly, in my opinion, that money is no longer available to pursue that. And I think it's rather disingenuous for people to be suggesting that it was thrown out by the inspector. It wasn't thrown out. He actually makes very positive comments about the need for a relief road going forward.
Okay.
So I think personally, Madam Chairman, I think it's impossible to move this forward at this point in time. We've got to wait until we know what's going on at KCC.
Okay, I think I probably would disagree with that. And I think the way that Councillor Field said that we don't need to bring Councillor Harwood here. We can
agree with that.
We can just write to him and say, this was your action and implementation. Why did you, can you elaborate why you said that? And also, I think we need to just ask him again about whether this strategic infrastructure group could be moved forward again and revitalised. They said efforts could be made to revitalise it. We should write and ask if it can be revitalised. I think JTB, in the fullness of time, we don't need a JTB because we'll all be one thing anyway. So then we can have a big bun fight, can't we? Councillor, okay, I'm going to we're just on this recommendation. So I'm going to go Councillor Harper and then Councillor Mackay, and then I'm going to bring it to a close.
I'm happy that as chair and vice chair, you write to Tony, as you said. All I'd ask is if your letter to Tony and his response could just be circulated amongst the committee, just so we can all see, where we are. Thanks.
Of course, yeah, thank you. Councillor Mackay.
And slightly frivolous, possibly. Could we ask for our money back?
Ending the debt enforcement. Okay, so the proposal with accepting this recommendation is that we write to Councillor Harwood, ask him to explain the reason behind it, and then obviously make the efforts to revitalise this strategic infrastructure group. Is that agreed? Okay, we're going to go to a vote. Votes in favour? Votes against? Okay, thank you. That's that number 4 carried. Winding us back to number 3. Sorry, I know this, I'm going all over the place and I apologise. That is the recommendation wording that we put forward from the other meeting. So we can't now incorporate anything more about we'd rather use section 106 for all of our infrastructure needs going forward. So on that basis, I propose that we agree the action implementation that the Cabinet have come back with. Have I got a seconder for that? Councillor Mackay votes in favour. Okay, that's unanimous, thank you. So going forward, we've got the recommendation number 5, which is obviously that we just said any future reports that relate to either revising the seal charging schedule, or if we're going to have a look at the method by which it's allocated, if we move to top slicing or bidding or whatever, we'll come back to this committee to have a look at as pre-decision scrutiny. I mean, that is within our gift anyway. So obviously the action that's just come back is noted. So I propose that we agree with that. That's just what we can do as the committee. And then our final recommendation what we put forward was number 6, which is we're going to wrap this up in the findings of the review, and obviously we're going to send it back out to the people that helped us, so KCC and the council officers. So I don't see that's contentious. Is that agreed that we do that? Agreed. Thanks ever so much. So that concludes us totally on the section 106 and seal item that we worked through as a working group. And if I am correct, that is the close of business for this evening. So on that basis, I declare the meeting closed. Thanks ever so much. I'll see you in the next municipal year.